Okay.
All right. Our guest today is Mike Murphy, famed GOP strategist and co-host of the Hacks on Tap podcast with David Axelrod. Mike Murphy, welcome back to the news.
It is good to be here, Matt. Thank you for having me, man.
Great to talk with you, and thanks for doing the Zoom call. I figure we can talk a little bit and then we can open it up. But so last night when I was watching President Trump's coronavirus task force briefing, I thought it might not be as fun of a conversation with you because it sounded like we had serious Trump who was rolling out a serious 3-phase plan to reopen the states that was going to have bipartisan, and here we are, like less than 24 hours later, and he's been tweeting "Liberate Michigan," and he's picked a fight with Andrew Cuomo. Like, he can't keep it together for more than a few hours.
No, it's clear the medicine wears off. He, these press conferences, the staff writes something that he kind of half comprehends, and he kind of staggers through it. And then the Q&A starts, and of course that's unleashed Donald Trump, and then he gets into trouble because his compass will bring it back to him and his political situation and blame shifting and, fabrication and then of course the endless kind of superlatives. It's like superlative torture, it just never stops. And he tries to kind of beat the audience into submission. And this thing is classic because you got a couple of chuckleheads in my home state of Michigan who decided, even though it's an epicenter, particularly in the Detroit area, that the biggest problem they have is not being able to go out and catch the virus by mingling around in shopping malls and gun shows. So, of course, and there's a Betsy DeVos operative named Greg McNeely somehow involved on this, which is, I know Greg, this is a little dumb for him, but anyway, for whatever reason, they're doing that. And now Trump, of course, with that impulse control issue, just grabs the Twitter account, or his golf caddy / Twitter copywriter does, however that stew is made, and starts hitting send. And now he's basically saying, free Michigan in all caps, uprise, revolutionary slogans. It is just completely crazy. I don't know how Fauci does it. He is living a downfall, remix. I mean, he is. There should be a special presidential medal of freedom for just kind of putting up with all this insanity.
Yes, I'm rooting for Fauci to pander all he needs to pander and say whatever he needs to say to keep his gig for our sake.
Yeah, I'm in the same thing. It's the old counterattack with the 5th Panzer Division. Fear the Panzer Division was destroyed 3 years ago at Stalingrad. Lies! You just have to kind of wait for the tantrum to go and try to get back to, whatever you're doing. So I'm sympathetic, but it's unnerving to watch, to say the least.
So is your sense that this whole thing today with Michigan, is this Trump sort of unable to control himself, or is there a strategy here? I mean, I can imagine a scenario where there is some Tea Party version 2 at play here.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of both. I've never, and I could be very wrong about this, but I've never bought the idea that Trump's like in the dinner jacket, cleverly figuring out the strategy and goes and puts on the clown suit. I think Trump is driven more by impulse and reaction, but he has a certain animal cunning for populism and his chunk of the electorate. And, he knows the little secret so far, due to basically geography and population density, is where most of the immediate public health pain has been felt. It's less so now as the virus moves and grows and spreads, but has been in the big urbanized counties. And, if you look at the election, this is something that's become very true about American politics that gets missed a little. There are about 3,300 counties in the U.S. Hillary and most Democrats in the presidential race got the overwhelming bulk of their vote from only 200 of them. And in the other, 2,900 beyond, Trump did really well, most of them. So in the America where the center of gravity for Democratic votes are, you're looking at Los Angeles County, Riverside County. You're in New York. You're in the Dade in Miami, Broward in Miami. So those are the places, because of density, it kind of in different ways struck first. So I think Trump's instinct antenna reads kind of his populist vote that could be in a less populous rural county, where at least the perception was, this isn't our problem, it's not happening here. And why do we have to stay home with the kids setting fire to the Lee Greenwood prints on the wall and everything? You know, the quality of life for most Americans stuck in this thing is really tough. So, and not to mention the economic pain, the prime thing of get back to work. So there is a resonant chord to what he's doing in Trump America. But, you know, this thing is evolving. And you can see it in South Dakota, in the slaughterhouse industry. It's moving. And Trump is behind the curve because he's not a guy of data or science. He's somebody of instinct. So I think he feels an opportunity in his marketplace of that kind of voter to kind of pander. And, you know, populism, in my view, and of course I'm a horrible elitist, the P is for pander. It's tell the mob what it wants. Excuse me. So only a cold, I guarantee you. So the mob wants to be told, yeah, go fight Gretchen Whitmer, which has another dimension because Trump hates her from an earlier feud. She's a Democrat. It's a swing state. So I think Trump says, ooh, my people are upset. I'm going to pander to my people. But, you know, it's hard to spin a pandemic, particularly one, you know, with a 200%, if left alone, infection rate that, you know, is very hard to contain. Now we're having some success in the initial phases, but Trump is a master of change the channel. He's perfect for the Washington food fight when the stakes are low. Oh, Mueller calls me a name, I'll call Mueller a name, and people kind of tune it all out. It's DC bullshit. But this is the real world now. The stakes are high, and the Trump antics become harder and harder to afford.
So, are you in the camp? I'm in this camp. I'll put my cards on the table.
Sure.
You know, back in like say January, I thought Trump had a maybe 55% chance of reelection. And today, if I'm betting, I would bet on Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm not going to say it's a blowout and never count Trump out, right? I mean, he's the Houdini, as there's a Politico piece today that explains how his whole life he's been pulling off these amazing escape acts. But if I had to bet today, I think I'd bet on Biden. Where are you?
Well, I've always, and I've been wrong a lot, so don't go bet the college fund, but I've been short Trump since the beginning on the mathematical theory, which was ever since Trump's been nominated, Republicans have underperformed in just about every election, over 90% of them. I don't care if these are gubernatorial elections, special elections, state Senate, even in safe Republican districts we've won, we have underperformed. And we lost the House for a reason. We've lost control of over a dozen governorships for a reason. So I think Trump has done tremendous harm to the brand. And if you crunch all those numbers, we have lost the suburbs compared to our historical normalcy, particularly college-educated white women, but college-educated white men too. We're getting clobbered in the suburbs, hard to win. So I've thought Trump is always in a bit of a cul-de-sac with a demographic cul-de-sac with a limited number of voters. And unless he learns to use the presidency to help himself politically, not to just win constant Republican primaries, which is a subset of the election, not enough to win, he's going to be in trouble as long as the Democrats don't nominate Trotsky. And, you know, maybe they could have. So there was some risk there. But as long as it's a referendum of Trump and Trump doesn't use something big like this crisis to improve his numbers and win the suburbs back, he's in real trouble. So where I was wrong, and I may be wrong again, is that I didn't think Biden would get nominated. I thought he'd lose New Hampshire big. I thought he'd lose Iowa, and I thought he'd crack up. Well, those two things happened, but the demography of the Democratic Party now, if you can hang on to that African-American, you know, base in the South, and to some extent the base of color in Nevada and the Caucasus, you can do pretty damn well. And Biden did. He had the amazing comeback. So that's a long-winded way of saying I think Trump's in real trouble. He needs a bad Democratic opponent to change the subject off him and maybe win. I think the virus and his actions during it and the economic cost of it have all made life tougher for Trump. And I think Biden, at least on paper, has proven to be a stronger candidate than at least I thought. So I think things are lined up well for Biden. I think the Democrats have a gift for losing elections. It could still happen. But if I were the insurance underwriter playing just the math right now, I would bet my money against the Trump reelect. The only thing Trump has going besides he has three things going. The theoretical idea that they will pick a running mate that he can create all kinds of distractions with, and Biden will fumble, and that'll inure to his benefit. He still needs a lot of that to be able to overcome his demographic problems. Remember, since the day Trump was elected, by about 77,000 votes out of 13 million in those key states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. The country has changed demography just based on mortality rates.
Right.
There are more voters who are younger then who are less Republican, and some of Trump's voters have gone on to admire him from the sky, just because Trump, like most Republicans, does better with older voters, older white voters in particular. So he's got to really do well to overcome the demographics, but maybe the Dems screw up. Second thing he has, which is minor, but it's effective in setting the agenda, he's put this Jedi mind twist on the media that because Nate Silver was wrong, Trump has some secret, and it's very condescending, but it's the subtext of a lot of reporters in the coastal elites, that Trump has this weird ram's horn that he blows with some secret dog whistle to redneck America, and they all come out and the polls are all wrong and the Russians fix it. So Trump has magic. He's Rasputin. He can't be killed. So that psychology does help him.
Which is amazing because really,
yes, the data's the opposite. But yeah,
it was one. I mean, granted, it was an amazing, miraculous victory, but it's still only one election that he won. And yet I do think there is this lingering perception that he is magic. Now, if you read that piece I was talking about in Politico about the Houdini Act, he has been kind of pulling off these reinventions and resurrections his whole life, but not always in politics.
Yeah, he's been audited once in 2016, and he slipped through. Every audit since then for the party, somebody's gone to jail. You know, so he's kind of a one-hit wonder. But we're seeing the last thing really quickly is, can he, if the new viral cocktails work, so the fatality rate goes down, less time on ventilators. If the new rDNA tech means we get to a vaccine, a workable one that can be scaled up quicker, closer to a year than the traditional 18 to 24 months. You know, if we can surge, and this is really hard to do the testing and the DNA side, do you have it? And the serology blood testing, which is easier, it's old school, easier to manufacture, but you have had it. And all that works. And the economy proves to be a little more resilient than the doomsayers think about this. And we have a bit of a comeback. And all of a sudden, this thing is in the rearview mirror. And Trump can run the old Jerry Ford post-Watergate campaign that moved 30 points from behind. We're back on track. We're feeling good. We beat this thing. It wasn't as bad as the media told you. The media wanted it. The media wanted America to die, so I got in political trouble. And the Electoral College thing works, that he can get his blue-collar voters in the Great Lakes back. Then, yes, Trump could win. Well, no, but it's all hard. So you put a gun to my head, Trump loses.
Yeah, what's so frustrating about that, and I totally think that's what he wants to do, but it was Trump whose estimate was, and I'm sure it was from the CDC, but Trump went on TV and said, 100,000 deaths on the conservative side. It could be as many as 200 and some thousand. So it's not like the media said that. Trump said that.
Right. But, we're in postmodern politics where it's all a show. It's all deconstructed. And Trump argues like a Marxist. Well, the media is bourgeoisie, so they cannot tell the truth. They're lying to you. Only trust your own class, which is me, the peasant king. So there is no truth. Everything is relativistic. It's the great poison of Trump in our political culture. Up is down, down is up. He changes what he says every day with a straight face and declares victory. And, we run the tape and say, you didn't say that 2 days ago. But out in tribal American politics, people think, the Dems are all, media is lying to get rid of them. And it doesn't mean anything. I'm right, you're evil. So everything you say is a lie and can't be trusted. There is no argument. It's really scary because it undermines kind of the molecular structure of a democracy where you can have objective facts.
Totally. So you mentioned Biden's running mate. I feel like there's an 80% chance, maybe more, that it's going to be either Klobuchar or Harris. Who do you think's the safer, better pick?
Of those two, Klobuchar. You want to make sure the Secret Service has a really good food tester, on the job 24/7 with Amy. I would pick Whitmer of Michigan because she's got a COVID story.
Really?
It's a more important swing state than Minnesota. Minnesota, we always come close.
Wait. Do you disagree with me that it's very likely it will be either Harris or Amy?
I don't know. I'd be for Gia Raimondo, or I'm probably mispronouncing her name, in Rhode Island, just because I think she's the best Democratic governor in the country on policy. She's been really brave with the public employee unions, but who cares about Rhode Island? And nobody wants in the Democratic leadership a fight with the public employee unions. Biden put himself in the corner and said, it has to be a woman. So that leads to your question about Klobuchar versus Kamala Harris. The Dems have such a fetish for identity politics now. It's a trap and a mistake. They should be in the beat Donald Trump politics. So I think there will be pressure on him for Kamala Harris. There will be pressure on him for Stacey Abrams. But the problem there, we know Kamala's a dud candidate. She's been pressure tested. Her one moment of surge in the campaign, which she could not run with, which is a big tell in politics. If the horse can run fast and can't sustain it, it tells you a lot about the horse isn't quite ready for the Derby. Her one moment was kneecapping Biden with a cheap shot. And I'll guarantee you there's one person in the Biden campaign who remembers that. It's Joe Biden. And you cannot underestimate how much the personal dimension of having to work with and at least half trust somebody comes into the calculation. I had a friend who was running for president and called me into a secret meeting to ask about names. I wasn't working on the campaign, but asked my advice about names. And we had a pretty frank conversation. And one rather pugnacious possibility came up, and the guy said, yeah, I love it on paper, but I have to live with the SOB. And that name was gone. So I think the fact is, and this is another tragedy of the Trump era, but I think an African-American candidate in this election, in this moment, against this opponent for the Democrats is a political mistake, because Trump will use race and you open up that channel. And even though Kamala's got problems as I think an underperforming candidate, she gives Trump something to work with, and so does Abrams. If I were the Democrats, I would be thinking like timid insurance actuaries trying to eliminate risk. Get out of the way. Let the country fire Trump, which is what it wants to do. And the minute Biden puts a handle on his candidacy that Trump can grab onto and wrestle with, that's an opportunity for Trump. So, there's always this silliness about VPs. Oh, I'm left-handed, I got to pick right-handed. I'm old, I got to pick young. Don't pick based on differences, because then the story is the difference. You don't want the story to be, you want the story to be how great you are. And so the model for this, and they never do it this way, there's always so much overthink, because nobody votes on vice president. They just use the vice presidential choice to make a decision about the decision-making and what they think of the incumbent. I tell a joke that the Hollywood analogy is, if I were Robert Redford's agent and the big studio calls, hey, we're going to make Iron Man 6, and we're thinking Redford. Now, we know he's a little old, but he's great. Oh, he's out in a triathlon right now. Bob would love it. He'd win an Oscar. He's great. He wants to be Iron Man. Great, let's do the deal. And then the studio guy says, yeah. And this time it's going to be a two-hander. He's got this sidekick, Zinc Man. And we're talking to Brad Pitt. Now, if you're Robert Redford's agent, you say, look, we love Brad Pitt, but we're really thinking maybe Abe Vigoda, because you're judged by the comparison. So Clinton was the genius. He picked a slightly less impressive version of himself. I am a DLC moderate new Democrat from the South who can play on the Republican backfield. I'm going to pick Al Gore, another new Democrat, moderate Democrat from the South, who's like a less impressive version of me. So we're making one pitch and there's very little daylight. So if I were Biden, I would find a good, reliable war horse, which you can argue is Amy. You take race away. You can argue is Whitmer, who puts you right into Michigan, and she's good. I've watched her for a long time in Michigan politics. And if he hadn't made the pledge that it has to be identity in a woman, but he had, so it's relevant, you would go pick a boring, solid, empathy-heavy, competent-heavy Democrat and get out of the way. Eliminate. I told Mitt, go pick Rob Portman. It's you. Pick yourself. Paul's great, but you're not going to win Wisconsin. And now you're going to be talking about Republican, Medicare amendments forever. Why you want to buy all that? You can tell that, my
didn't take
overwhelming.
I'd like to play the race over and play the campaign over sometimes.
You just want the VP to support the overall pitch and get out of the way and never be a liability.
So, but Whitmer, it seems like maybe Trump's afraid of her, but it seems like he's turning her into a lightning rod. Aren't you afraid?
Yes.
That it seems like
he's
working
making her bigger, I think. Yeah, but I look at her number. She's sitting there at 73% in Michigan. How's Trump looking? He's not the 50 in Michigan. He's probably, right now, he's had a little bump. He's probably up 48 maybe. But, and she's got an infrastructure and everything. I mean, she's not perfect. There's downside. But the thing about Amy is Trump will probably come close and lose Wisconsin again. And Amy's got a lot of chops, but you ask anybody in Democratic politics, and Amy's got elbows. So she's hard to deal with in a staff sense, in a wider group. Would she be a terrible choice? No. Who would I want to live with after the election if I'm the president? Amy or Gretchen? It would be Gretchen. It's like, do I want to get a nice, family-friendly, reliable, wonderful dog, or a great but rather high-strung dog that's going to chew up some sofas just for quality of life? I'm going to skip the Pekingese and go for the Labrador. That would be, I think, that dimension. But if they're going to look at them both, I'm sure, and they may find something that we don't know about, because none of these state people have really been super vetted. Amy's been a little bit vetted, but Amy never caught on enough in the Democratic primaries to get the real electron microscope treatment. And Gretchen hasn't been on the national stage, though she's been a big state governor in her second term.
No, it looks like Susan Collins is in trouble. Martha McSally looks like she's in trouble. I don't know about Cory Gardner and Tom Tillis. I haven't seen much on them lately, but I always thought the most Trumpian outcome of this all would be if all the Republicans who gave away their dignity to support Trump, if they all lost and Trump managed to win re-election.
Yeah.
That'd be like
that would be the perfect literary outcome of this.
Yes.
But those are tough states. Look, Cory was going to be in trouble. He hangs on by a thread to begin with, and Trump is a real weight on him. Same thing for even worse for Susan Collins. Maine ain't what it used to be. So they were behind the eight ball to begin with. The question is the people in more friendly but Democrat winnable, theoretically, states, the North Carolinas, the Iowas, the Arizonas, and nobody's got good numbers right now in any of those places. But can Trump run enough of a Republican campaign? Can he damage Biden enough to get back to normalcy, in a Carolina, particularly in Iowa for Ernst and other places? And the very fact that that's a question now is a sign of weakness for the R's. And again, the nightmare scenario, I talked about the Trump comeback because the virus goes away, but Trump starts saying, everybody back to work except LA, Chicago. He names 10 big Democratic cities and thinks he's playing a clever game there. Well, then we're going to get a second surge and we'll have a second shutdown and more economic problems compounding, and it'll all land on November.
Yeah.
So the Donald should keep an eye on the calendar.
And then
pain now is better than pain later.
Does he postpone the election? Do we do mail-in?
I'm not sure he can. I'm not sure he can postpone the election. It's state secretaries of state that really, it's not federalized.
That's
other
good.
than the Constitution and the rule book. Yeah. The problem is we ought to do more vote by mail. The great irony in that, here in Los Angeles, where I am, in California, Republicans won based on mail-in balloting. We built the mail-in balloting machine to get suburbanites who didn't want to go wait in line and everything to be able to mail early. So, it is a myth that massive mail-in is bad for the GOP. It really isn't. What Trump is really worried about is easier registration combined with mail-in ballot will turn up minority participation. But, them's the rocks. I was so deep, and look, I'm a right-wing nut. I'm a conservative. I don't like Trump because I think he's a populist creep and he's Juan Perón. He's not a conservative, and I'm not for the Democrat cocktail at all. But as a Republican, the party of Lincoln, the very fact that our Wisconsin guys, I used to work there. I did Tommy Thompson races, but they wired the thing so we only had 5 precincts in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Open. Which is basically where the African American vote in Wisconsin is. I mean, come on, that's like low rent Huey Long thuggery. I mean, that's way beyond tough politics. It's just and not a voice in the party about it.
What do you make? So you're talking about being a Republican. What do you make of some of your colleagues, prominent Republican strategists who have publicly, it's like the Lincoln Group, I forget the exact name, who have publicly endorsed Joe Biden? I get where they're coming from. Just like you, Mike, I have very serious concerns about Donald Trump, and I didn't vote for him, and I'm not going to vote for him. Can you be a future leader of the Republican Party or the conservative movement and vote for Joe Biden?
I think you can. I mean, I'll confess, I think I've tweeted this, I'm going to vote for Biden. And I sent him $500. I've never given money to a Democratic presidential candidate in my life. My hand froze for an hour and a half. It was the most painful thing I've ever done. I also gave money to Doug Jones. I ran Sessions' first campaign. I was his media consultant, and I don't hate Jeff, but I see kind of what he's become and all that. And
by the way, that's another. I hate to have the Schadenfreude thing here, but that's another funny thing is that he's going to lose. That the guy,
I think so. Yeah,
the guy who endorsed Donald Trump before anybody did and helped him win the Republican nomination is going to lose in Alabama. So,
well, the great karmic wheel turns. Look at famous Vichy France politicians who went on to success. Not a lot. So, we don't worship Pierre Laval. So yeah, I think my guess is post-Trump, if God willing it happens, we will have a big Chinese civil war in the Republican Party. There will be a lot of warlords running around with uniforms and 5,000 guys. Nobody will be really in charge. There will be Trump imitators. There will be Trump legacy. There will be libertarian economic, people there. There's going to be something else, but it'll be a noble fight. And in the Trump faction of that, oh no, you were a traitor. You once, supported Joe Biden. That'll be a bloody shirt. But I'll tell you, I think much of the party is going to be so shell-shocked by losing and the incompetence of it that there's going to be a real demand or a real hunger for something new that isn't the exhausting world of Trump. So I think a channel change is coming. But it's an open question of how much the populism will stick. We've been knocking that stuff down since Pat Buchanan, and Trump broke it through. And a new modernized conservatism is going to have to be different, and we may get that right, we may not.
And I think coronavirus actually aids the populist impulse. So
yeah, I think so, because it's a Chinese invasion disease.
Yeah.
And it's clearly part of a foreign plot.
Last thing I wanted to ask you, and then I'll start bringing in a couple of our guests here.
Sure.
But I don't even know exactly how to ask this, but I just wanted to talk about John McCain, whom you worked for in the past. And just, I guess we're coming up on a couple months. It's going to be 2 years since we lost him. Just the juxtaposition between Trump and McCain, and any thoughts you had about him, I'm sure people would love to hear.
Well, I miss him every day. I wish you were around, because I would love to see the grainy news footage of 3 Secret Service guys pulling him off Trump, which is where it would have eventually ended. McCain would go over a desk at him, because he is the antithesis of everything McCain stood for. McCain was not perfect. He was, like all of us, he had his flaws, but he knew what the job of president was, and he knew what the purpose of public service was, and he knew what the idea of a cause bigger than yourself was. And Trump it's like he's a black hole of narcissism. He creates his own gravity field and pulls in and destroys everything. I often joke, at least I did last year when the baby Hitler stuff was going around, that if I had a time machine, I would not go back and kill baby Hitler. I would go back and tell Fred Trump not to be such an asshole to his 10-year-old, because we're all gonna pay a huge price here. And so McCain was on to Trump, and I think his frustration with him would have increasingly just boiled over.
All right, let's bring in some folks. David Petrusha, I guess you were the first in. Do you have any thoughts or questions?
Well, I was asking Bill Scheer last week about third-party candidacies and what impact they might have, because they, we had
Justin Amash, right?
Exactly. In the last week, all of a sudden, that became a lot more intelligent question. And on the left, is there anyone on the left who could steal votes from? Because we've seen some of the Bernie people are making noises against Biden already, So there's on the fringes, which can be significant in a very close race, and I think it could be a very close race again.
Yeah, no, look, I don't
any thoughts on that?
I think it's a great question. Look, Bernie, if he did it, could be formidable. He's made it pretty clear he will not. because I think he's a rational, he's a calculating Paul like any of the good ones who know how the game works, and he wants to beat Trump. But it's interesting, the third party thing, there's always an appetite for it. You know, there's always a demand in the marketplace for it. The hard thing is the distribution. You know, we're kind of like, our democracy works a little bit like the beverage business. You know, if we all cooked up a great new Coca-Cola product, our biggest problem would not be having people taste it and say, I want to buy this. It would be, how do we get it into 100,000 stores? We need zillions of trucks, bottling plants. The distribution is really, really hard. Another joke I tell sometimes when I'm speaking is, how many people have had Dasani water? And every hand goes up. How many of you like walked a mile to get a Dasani water? No hands. Nobody wants Dasani water. It's the water that's already there. It's in the hotel mini bar. It's in the fast food window. It's in the 7-Eleven. Well, why is it there? It's the water of the Coca-Cola company. It's on the same trucks. And so currently, and this may change in the future, it's very hard to get on the ballot in about half the country if you're running an independent candidacy, unless you go to one of the long-established parties that might be on like 40 ballots. You know, Libertarian, it used to be Old American Independent, Curtis LeMay Party. You know, there are skeleton organizations, but to have a real reform candidacy, center right or center left, and to actually go get on the ballot in our Coke Pepsi political distribution system is really hard. Now, in the future, as blockchain really becomes the way of encrypting the internet, voting on your phone will start to be more possible. And then it's a lot of those walls, you don't need the trucks anymore. You know, then the third party thing starts to be operationally possible. But right now, beyond getting on the ballot, the fights when you get on the ballot are all agitated by a member of the Republican or Democratic Party who have a rare joint interest in screwing the third party channel. And even if you did, this was, you know, like the old Bloomberg there, you get the 39%, you lead the popular vote. Well, then you have unit voting by congressional delegations in Congress, so the Republican and Democratic parties have to agree to put themselves out of business in the White House, which is a big ask for politicians. So in a big way, I don't think it's going to happen. In a little way, though, could somebody go poll 3% in Michigan, you know, the Justin Amos theory? Yeah, it's interesting, and it's worth watching. You know, I think
who happens to be from Michigan.
Right, exactly. And, you know, so he could go, particularly on like a Second Amendment thing, you know, maybe he goes and polls 9 or 10% in a couple dozen counties in central Michigan, and maybe in the Detroit northern suburbs, and all of a sudden he's at 5% statewide.
But does a guy like him, a guy like him actually end up stealing votes from Trump or stealing votes who would have gone to Biden? Does he shortstop them?
Yeah, that is the question. And the truth is, it tends to be complicated. It's never clean. Some people just like the weirdness of third parties. So he would steal from both. The question is what ratio? You know, and my guess is he'd steal more from Trump than from Biden. But it's kind of like playing around with human cloning. You know, you don't quite know where it leads. On paper, you think you know what's going to happen because of the common sense of two conservatives. But on the other dimension, it's more two candidates. The Democrats generally don't like it because their theory is don't split the anti-Trump vote with too many choices, even if one is conservative. Because if you're Biden, would you rather have the risk of a 5% Amash pulling some of your blue-collar, pro-gun auto workers in the Detroit suburbs, or because he's very pure on the Second Amendment, or would you rather have a bunch of Republicans agree just not to vote? You know, you have a little campaign with the tape over the mouth and a picture of Reagan, not this time, just you don't have to vote for Biden, just don't vote for Trump. That has the same impact. If you can turn a Trump vote into a I pass vote, I'm not voting for anybody for president, that's perfectly fine for Biden. You know, so it's tricky, but it could be a thing. And again, if Zephyr Teachout can link up with a bunch of disaffected Bernie types and run some purity protesting and start pulling 2 or 3%, again, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Madison, Wisconsin, you know, then that could be interesting the other way.
Did you pull her name just theoretically, or has that been mentioned, or her?
No, she's run before. She's kind of a perennial Bernie fringe candidate type. So I just pulled her name out of a hat to have a body to assign it to. You know, but I have no knowledge of anything she's doing. But there are no shortage of people who like the idea of being a third-party candidate. The question is, do they have enough of a brand that online they could turn it into anything material?
Yeah, I suppose you could get some Hollywood type who might do it, faded or fading Hollywood type. Someone with a name.
Right. What the Hollywood phrase, which is great, is pre-aware title. In other words, somebody you've heard of enough that they have a couple $1 million of free ID. I mean, I always thought Rachel Maddow wanted to run as a third party, you know, and I don't think it's against Trump so much, but in the past, you know, if she didn't like Hillary from the left, she could be a tremendous 7% problem for the Democrats.
It is amazing, isn't it, that there hasn't been,
or a famous podcaster.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, Joe Rogan. Someone like a Joe Rogan could do it.
Yes. It's in our culture now. Trump proved that being in a look. What was Trump's qualification? He was on primetime TV for a decade. Even if all he was doing was teaching Gary Busey how to work a snow cone machine, he was the can-do, in-charge guy, and all that free publicity was gold for him. He was famous. I mean, I ran Schwarzenegger's campaign here. You know, he people literally thought he'd blow up the Capitol, and that's what they liked about him. You know, because the movie perception was worth a lot to him. You know, it made him famous, and famous annies you in. A Kardashian could run, for Christ's sake. It is the terrifying things are unlimited. Arnold at least took it seriously.
Let's bring in Stephen Dowse. Do you have any thoughts, or you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to ask. We're talking about the post-Trump era for the GOP, and I'm wondering if you're paying attention to different strategies and messaging tactics that current politicians are trying, and what you think about the different strategies they're trying, and which ones you like and don't like.
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, we're still coming to grips. It's funny. I don't do campaigns anymore. I'm now a deep state corporate, shill, and I write TV shows and movies out here in Hollywood. But I'm always in these meetings where there's a well-intentioned 23-year-old with extremely interesting eyewear, explaining to me algorithms and TikTok, and the assumption we old goats don't get it. I built my first computer with a soldering iron, and the fundamental point of the digital revolution is really true. We're changing the way we communicate. In the old days, you'd walk into a congressional campaign in America in 1976, and there would be a steel lockbox in the campaign manager's desk. And if you had the key and you'd open it up, you would find $3,000 of stamps. And there'd be volunteers at long tables putting flyers and material together and addressing envelopes, and they'd duel out the stamps. And that was a key communications organ of the old school campaign. Well, now at the internet, we have free stamps. We know a lot more about the mailboxes. And so that gives effective messages, and often hot messages, like an ability to go out for free. I mean, I've got Twitter followers.
You can also test which messages are more effective very easily as well.
Right, exactly. The thing will self-optimize because you can A/B test, and whatever one wins the fight moves up, and you roll it out. But I can tweet a joke right now for free that'll go around the world in 2 seconds and totally destroy my career by the time the next one of you guys has a remark. I mean, it is unbelievable the power of digital information to blow stuff out. But the problem is it also allows us, because we have the ability to kind of create digital spaces, to build reinforcement bubbles and to lie, cheat, and steal. I mean, the old days, the precinct was geographic. You would walk it. You had to be 80 people. You'd knock on the door. How's your kid on the police department? Everything working? The mayor counting your support? How you leaning? What's your issue? And you fill it out. And, there was an organizational system. Now the precinct is virtual. It's your social media network. If I want to know about education, I don't talk to my neighbor down the street who I might not even know anymore as a teacher. I call my face, or I email or text, or, a million ways, my old friend from high school is a high school principal 1,000 miles away. So information moves sideways for free, and campaigns are learning how to kind of generate that content to be used virally, and how to kind of use analytics to try to amplify that with advertising. But it also opens up this system. Think of it as a box surrounded by screen doors, not a wall, for outside actors to generate content into there, which isn't always true. People believe bad news. If you ever go through a stack of resumes, oh, military veteran, great. Speak Spanish, great. Oh, probation for check bouncing. That's the resume you believe. And you think, your brain goes in to protect me from I'm a caveman, protect me from the bear mode, survival, defense. You pull that resume apart and you keep your eye on it. bad news travels faster, and the internet is tremendous for destructive news because, you know, you look at any of the clickbait when you go on a website, it's always a provocative ad. 5 things that'll kill you in an egg, you know, and your brain wiring tricks in and you click to find out what the hell is wrong with an egg. And so the internet is incredibly fertile ground for that. So, you know, on one hand, it's given candidates an ability to get a message out for less money, creating a virtual world that'll then give them money, and the thing should compound forward. It also produces a way to really shoot message, you know, poison into the bloodstream for not much money. And it thrives there. It's like a virus of its own. And we still don't have the tools to track and police it.
Well, I would keep going, but sadly I have to soon go monitor yet another Trump coronavirus task.
Today's going to be good, I think. I think today, end of the week, I think he's gonna hit the big gong, because the media will be all after how dare Michigan uprise, and he'll run with that. That's my prediction.
Before you go, Mike, why don't you talk just a little about this cool partnership you have now with David Axelrod and Hacks on Tap. I love what you guys do. And
well, thank you, and thank you for the plug. Yeah, we have been friends since we were puppy consultants a million years ago. And I mean, he's a communist. He's wrong on everything, but he's a patriot and a really good person. We used to run campaigns against each other. We had a thing called the Iowa Cup because we'd run governor. You know, I'd win one, he'd win, back and forth. And we'd go out and hide in the small towns sometimes and meet because we live in parallel lives in the consulting racket back then. And we became very good friends. So we had this tradition of just calling each other and bullshitting about politics. Because, you know, being a campaign consultant is kind of like being a Big Ten football coach. Everybody thinks they can do your job. You know, the quarterback's a genius when you win, and you're the moron when you lose. And it's a weird life to have. It's fun, and I enjoyed my time doing it, but it's kind of fun to talk to your peers, not only the one you're playing against, but just people who are in that weird world. So we would do that a lot, and it was Axelrod's idea. He said, hey, why don't we do this as a podcast, these conversations we used to have all the time? And that started it, and then we once in a while we're bringing guests, particularly in a slow news week. We tried candidates, but they won't say anything. We literally needed a Jaws of Life machine to get a word in.
They're tend to be the worst guests, actually.
Yeah, they're horrible because they go into their thing. You have to hit them over the head with an alligator to get them to stop and try to, you know. But the political hacks will talk, or like we had Rahm Emanuel this week. It was great. We got into a big thing about dead voters in Chicago, and he said, "Of course," and they all voted for me. The way it ought to be was very funny because he let his hair down, and it's kind of a clubhouse chat about politics. We don't argue issues much. I tease them a little bit, but I'm so anti-Trump, we don't have to fight about that, which is tedious. And what you really get is a couple of old retired baseball players talking about what's really going on the mound. And if you're a political junkie, one of the reasons we did it without getting him or me in trouble is we both work for cable news networks, where often you are given 17 seconds where you're, you know, trying to be on a panel with Miss Oklahoma to discuss the Electoral College, and it doesn't go very deep. And expertise doesn't matter very much on cable TV now, at least in politics. It probably does in science and medicine and that. So we both wanted an ability to go into a little more depth and complexity for people who wanted to hear that from practitioners. So that was the idea. We're doing pretty good. We're selling a lot of scoop cereal. That's been the most fun thing, listening to Axelrod hawk adult cereal. Not that we make any money on this thing. We're just trying to cover our cost and get a little booze money out of it. And it's been a lot of fun.
I love it. Well,
on iTunes.
It's a great listen. Check it out on iTunes. And I love the medium of podcasting. And like I was telling you before we started taping, I mean, this has been so much fun for me, getting to talk to people like you, getting to meet folks and kind of build a little community. And, you know, people who join us on these Zoom calls, sure, and people watch them later, listen to them later. And we've actually, during the coronavirus, I thought we might start losing supporters, and we've actually gained, which is amazing. I'm super stoked about that. So thank you to everyone out there.
Thank you for what you do. And I will say to your supporters, keep the Patreon support coming, because the only thing about podcasts, people think there are a few elite podcasts that throw off a lot of money, but for most of us who do it for kind of love of the topic and maybe a love of our own verbosity, but for whatever, they're not big money makers. So those small Patreon donations keep great podcasts like this one, which is vital and excellent going. So keep up the good work, and I'm very proud to be here with you today.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you, everyone who's here, everyone who's listening, and check out Hacks on Tap, the podcast. And Mike Murphy, thank you for coming back on the news.
Anytime. Thanks, guys. See you later. Be safe.
See you guys. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.